my brothers and I have two older brothers, and we grew up in Battle Creek, Michigan, which, for those of you who don't know, Michigan is a state that used to have a good football team called the University of Michigan. They've been taken over by the University of Alabama and Auburn occasionally, but you might not remember. Well, actually, Saban was with Michigan State. I hope you guys know that. So he kind of cut his chops there, but he was a great coach even at Michigan State. But anyway, we grew up as Beatles fans, and we had a group called the Berlin Airlift, and we played in junior high, high school dances. And so when we went to London together, we planned this for literally 10 years, we wanted to cross Abbey Road, where the Beatles, this is the 50th anniversary of the Abbey Road album, one of the greatest album covers of all time. So I wanted to show you that. Is that incredible? And they gave me this pointer, so be careful, I'll blind you. But that's me, my middle brother Jan, and my oldest brother Josh, kind of declining heights. I'm not sure about that. But then what we do is when we get together for reunions, we take a Beatles album and we Photoshop it to look like one of the Beatles albums. So that's really Abbey Road. This is the Abbey Road album. And then there I am. There's my brother, and there's my oldest brother, and there's John. We decided not to take him out. But we grew up on Helmer Road, so we kind of have fun with it. And I'm not sure why I showed you that, but this one's kind of funny. This is Let It Be. This is our Reunion 5 album. So this is actually us. See, there's the non-Beatles hair look, and then there's the Beatles hair look. So see, isn't that creative? So I got that going for me, which is nice. But I just wanted to share, because we had so much fun. If you at all are a Beatles fan, you got to go to Liverpool. It's just a lot of fun. But moving to why I'm here, I'm busy just like all of you are, and I appreciate you taking the time to be here. But I speak only because I have a burden to share. And if I didn't feel that I could help some of you in this room with perhaps your faith, your own struggles, personal struggles, faith struggles, I wouldn't take the time to be here. And I mean that really seriously. We all have a lot to do. But I have a burden because of a couple things. And the first is, in my 20s and 30s, and I see a lot of young people here, which really excites me. And in my 20s and 30s, I had a huge angst inside me because I was a believer, I had a faith, but I had no clue whatsoever how to live it out in the workplace. And as in the introduction, what John said, I had about a 20-year career with the auto industry, which is probably the most competitive industry in the world, I think. One of them, international, there's always somebody with cheaper labor costs, and it's a huge market, attracts a lot of capital. And I didn't see any examples of kind of what I would call Christ-centered people leading in that world. So I just didn't think it was possible. And I was always searching, wondering, there has to be a better way to lead. There has to be a better way to work. And so I was searching for a long time. And but I can tell you that after 15 years at Hershen Entertainment, which is when I wrote the book that he talked about, Love Works, I can tell you very definitively that love, the verb, does work as a leadership principle. And I hope that after my talk, you walk out of here very challenged about how to lead, very challenged about how you might want to look at leadership differently, that you can live out your faith day to day in the workplace. But to tell you the story, I need to back up a little bit and talk about my own journey so that I can apply what I learned from some very special people. This is actually the house in Battle Creek, Michigan, where I grew up. About when I was probably 15 or so, we did add an upstairs, but my dad was a failed entrepreneur, had the wrong farm machinery dealership. Has anybody ever heard of Oliver in here? The tractor brand? Yeah, one person. That was exactly the problem. Who's heard of John Deere? Yeah, see everybody. Well, that was the problem. We had an Oliver dealership, and they went out of business in the 60s. And then my dad ended up, after a lot of different hopping around, being a factory worker. The point is not that we were poor, really, because they were loving parents. My mom was gone a lot. She had depression. She was hospitalized a lot. And what I realized about myself is I needed accolades from other people because I didn't feel like I got it at home. And it took me years of therapy and shrinks to kind of figure that out. But I was always so driven to succeed and make money and do the things that were what I would call do goals. It's what do I want to do to be successful? And it was driving me very, very hard in my 20s and 30s. But at the same time, a parallel path, when I was 16, I became a Christian through a Fellowship of Christian Athletes camp. And I heard a speech actually by a pro football player at the time, and it really convinced me to take a look at faith. And I don't have time in this talk to go into that into a lot of detail, but I will say this to those of you who may not be believers at all, or you're struggling a lot with what Christianity is and what it means. I would really encourage you, if you're struggling, to read about the historical evidence about Jesus and his claims. And that really convinced me, because there is no doubt that Jesus was on this earth. Even other historians write about him. Jewish historians like Josephus, or Roman historians like Tacitus wrote about a Jesus of Nazareth. They write about he claimed to be the Messiah. There was a sect called Christians. And the issue is, do we believe in what he said or not? And when you look at what happened with his disciples, when they didn't even stay around when he was arrested, they were fearful, and yet almost all of them ended up dying martyrs' deaths because they claimed, as an eyewitness, they saw Jesus resurrected, is a really important fact to me in my own belief system, because men die for lies all the time that they think are the truth. Like, think of any terrorist organization. They believe in what they think is the truth, but it's a lie. Well, these men were alive at the time and wrote, like Luke and Mark, they are eyewitness accounts. They don't die for lies when they know it's a lie. Men just don't do that. And so that helped me a lot get over the hump of, is this just a fairy tale, or is this something that really truly happened? Then when you look at what happened in the first, second century, it's incredible the change in culture that happened because of Christianity and the love that other people saw in the disciples and those that they taught. So I had this faith path going where I wanted to serve. I wanted to do what Jesus said was right. I wanted to love other people, but the work environment just didn't show that at all. And so after about 20 years in the car industry and 20 years of this kind of angst, I ended up meeting these people who are the Hershins. And on the far left is Jack Hershin, sitting next to his wife, Sherry, and then Pete, the taller one, and his wife, Jody. And these are the owners of Hershin Family Entertainment, and they're based in Branson, Missouri. I was already on their board because they just asked me to be on the board when I was running Saab North America, and they wanted a marketing person on the board, and that's the only reason I got there. When I decided to leave the auto industry, and that's a long story, I won't go into it other than I was in Amazon's car tab. I was CEO of that company. In 1999 and 2000, some of you are too young to remember, you could buy a car on Amazon, and we were that company. And Jeff Bezos was on our board. It was a Kleiner Perkins startup in Silicon Valley. It was a blast. I still think it's the right idea. I think Amazon could dominate. They would sell them through dealers. They had to go through the dealer network, but they would configure the car, give you one price, give you a trade-in value. That was the idea. Well, we got caught up in the dot-com implosion, and we launched just as the NASDAQ crashed. And long story short, we had to sell to our competitor. And that's why I transitioned out of the auto industry. I was looking for other things to do. And Jack calls me, and I'm just a 2-year board member. And he asked me to be chairman of the board. He had been the only other chairman, which is completely a God thing. It was a huge, gigantic pay cut. It was an interesting story how I said, Jack, I can't even support my mortgage payments on that, and I need X more. He said, well, Joel, let's pray about it. And so we prayed about it right over the phone, and this kind of stuff never happens to me often enough. The next day, I got a search call from a search consultant for a board seat for the exact amount of money that I needed to kind of cover my mortgage. And so I decided to take this leap, eventually became CEO. But this is what Jack and Pete taught me about loving and what I hope you walk out with today. The first question that I asked them is, why would we talk about love in the business world? It makes no sense to me. Love's about, I saw it as soft and reflective and kind and, kind of loving, which just makes sense. Whereas business to me was firm and tough and hard, and we had to hit the numbers. And at General Motors, where I had worked, if you didn't hit the numbers, you were gone. They didn't care about you as a human being. You just had to hit the numbers, period. And that's what I was used to. But what Jack said is, we are, as Christians, called to love other people. It's the number one commandment that Jesus gave us. And, we all know the verse, but basically when Jesus was asked to summarize all Scripture, he said, what? Love God, love others as yourself. And that's a really, really hard thing to do, especially in the business world. So the next question after that, love is the number one commandment. The next question is then, how do we talk about love? What is love? How is it defined? And this is where, if there's one thing about this concept that I hope you hear, is it's not the kind of love that we all think about when we hear the word love. There's only one English word for love. There are actually 4 different Greek words for the same idea in the English language. So we're very inadequate at trying to express what love is. And the problem is when Jesus says love others, or Paul writes love others in 1 Corinthians, we think of what Americans think of love. Well, that's not what they're talking about. They're talking about agape love. The other loves in the Greek language, the first is eros. That's a Greek word. That's where the word erotic comes from. And that's what we tend to think of as love. It's an emotional love. It's physical attraction. It's chemistry. And it's also the most fleeting of any of the loves. The second love is philos, and that's brotherly love. And that's where Philadelphia is named from the Greek word philos. Anybody been to Philadelphia? Is that the city of brotherly love? Yeah, I always ask that, and it always gets a laugh, because it's not. It's a misnamed city. But they throw, didn't they throw snowballs at Santa Claus at an Eagles game? The third word is storge, and storge is the love between a parent and a child. And that's a very unique kind of love that all of us parents are familiar with. And we do things for our kids we maybe shouldn't sometimes, to give them too much grace, maybe not enough. But it's a different kind of love. The last is agape. And agape is a verb, has a verb form, agapeo, and it's how you treat people regardless of how you feel about them. And that's the key point. It's not a feeling, it's a verb, it's an action. You can treat somebody in an agape loving way even if you don't like them. And that's the kind of love that Jesus was talking about. He spoke Aramaic, of course, but when they wrote the New Testament, they wrote it in Greek, and they used the word agape to reflect what he said. And when Paul wrote about love, he also used agape. So love is a verb, and that's the key point. Now, going into then, how did we define it at Hershon, and how could you define it in your own life that you can live out love every single day when you go into the workplace? We took 1 Corinthians 13, which is a verse that Paul wrote to the Corinthians. It's used in a lot of weddings. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love never fails. Love is everlasting. We paraphrase it into 7 words, and then we use those 7 words to measure the performance of our leaders at Hershon. So I'm going to just quickly go through these words at a high level. But patience, look, we all know you can't always be patient in a work environment. You have to get things done. People are behind. You have to hit deadlines. And I know that, and have been CEO of 4 different companies. I know what it means to have to perform, especially in a public company on a quarterly basis. But being patient in real crisis situations is what we're talking about. How do you handle it so that your employee who needs improvement or who needs to get something done, you handle it in a way that still protects their dignity? And Jack was the master at that. He could take you in his office and somehow kind of rip you a whole new philosophy on what you screwed up on, and yet he made you feel really respected at the end. We had a mantra called, at Hershon, patient was praise in public, admonish in private. And I know for me, the toughest things I've had to deal with is public admonishment. And I don't care who you are and how old you are, it affects you in a negative way. And there's a story I put in the book about, and I have many of them I could tell, including at SeaWorld. But one time in Saab, the guy I reported to, I ran the U.S., he ran the whole company in Sweden. He called me on Easter Sunday morning. We had missed 1 month out of a 3-year trend. Called me over to Sweden that day, which was Easter Sunday. I took the red eye, got in at 9 a.m. Eastern time. Sorry, 9 a.m. Swedish time. It was 3 a.m. Eastern time. Just got basically grilled for the entire morning and then just had to get on a plane and fly back. It was the biggest waste of time. And I don't even remember all that was said, but I never, ever forgot how I felt. And I would just encourage you, don't make other people feel that way, because they're not going to stay. I mean, I'm mentally checked out at that point. And when the headhunter called about the green light job with Amazon, I was open to it. So that's patience. Kindness, kindness, in the same way, kindness is not being nice all the time. We can't be nice all the time, but we can be more encouraging. And Jack was a master at writing handwritten notes. And I know that sounds odd in this day of the internet age and everybody's emailing, but now even more than ever, a handwritten note breaks through the clutter, breaks through all the junk that we get. And here's the key principle that I would ask you to think about. He started every day before he, picked up his phone and got into the emails and the texts and everything that all of us do every morning. He started the day thinking about the previous day with 6 pieces of paper, and he wrote 6 handwritten notes every morning. Takes, 5 minutes each. It took him about a half an hour, 20 minutes. Times 300 days a year, times 300 days, times 50-year career, thousands and thousands and thousands of handwritten notes are all over Hershon Entertainment, and they're like gold to people. But my point to you, that it helps you start the day on a positive note. And I've been practicing that on and off. I'm not as consistent as Jack for a lot of years, and it does make a difference in people's lives. Because let me ask you, as you're all grown adults, how many of you have had too much encouragement in your life? Has anybody had too much encouragement? I have had some people raise their hands, but that's good. I mean, that's great. But most men, most women, most human beings don't get enough. But that doesn't give us an excuse not to give others encouragement as loving people. So that's kindness, but we still have to get performance. Unselfishness, hard for human beings to do, but the key thing there is to think about ourselves less, not thinking less about ourselves. It's not self-deprecation, it's being unselfish in how we treat other people. Trusting. This is not just being a trustworthy person. This is also about being a trusting leader. And I had always been in environments with very autocratic, very strong leaders who wanted to make all the answers and give you all the answers, and they didn't develop their people. And what I learned from Jack and Pete is with clear decision-making responsibility, he let people make the decisions they were responsible for. He trusted them, and if they made a mistake, he taught them what the mistake was, and he taught people to get better. And he had greatly empowered people in the organization with very low turnover. And it taught me a lot about being a trusting leader. The book does go into some of the tools we use, like the RASI tool, which is a way to clarify responsibility levels. I won't go into it here, but it's a very important principle of leading with love. And then this one is obvious, being truthful, but I'm not talking about not cheating on your taxes or making sure the numbers are correct. That's illegal. I mean, that's the clear, bright line. What I'm talking about mostly, what I see weakness in leaders, including myself early in my career, be truthful to the people around you in how they're performing. It's the greatest gift as leaders we can give them, is to tell them the truth about how they're performing. Weak leaders, and I saw this mostly at General Motors, they don't have the courage to confront somebody and tell them they need to get better, and if they don't get better, they're going to lose their job, and here's some paperwork of what you need to do to get better. It's easier just to fire somebody, and that was the culture. Just get rid of them and get somebody else in there to get the job done. But that doesn't develop people, and it's certainly not a loving approach. So at Hershon, Jack had a rule, and I followed on when I took over. We wouldn't allow someone to get fired if the proper, truthful paperwork hadn't been filled. There wasn't some kind of discussion and an opportunity to perform, unless that person had broken the law or broken a safety rule. So that's truthfulness. And then forgiving, probably one of the hardest words in the English language, is to forgive people who have wronged you. And that's very, very difficult to do, and especially forgiving yourself. The last word is dedicated. And that's being dedicated to these principles, even in very difficult situations. I'm going to come back to this one in just a minute. But before I do that, I thought I would just take a break from my words. I want to show you a video from Undercover Boss. It was a while ago. I've aged a lot. This is called SeaWorld Gray. I had jet black hair going into SeaWorld, and within 3 years, had gone white. It was that's a whole different talk for a whole different time. But this was a great, Undercover Boss was a great experience. But what I want you to notice is what love can do in an organization. Our unselfish act at Hershon is we started a foundation that the employees had to put $1 in first. If they put $1 in, then we matched it and the owners matched it, and $1 became $3. And all that money was used to help employees in need. So what you see being given here came out of the foundation, and these employees got no special treatment. They had to go through the process just like anybody else. But it's a great way to build up a culture of giving and helping people. And nothing started with it if the employees didn't give money first, which was the magic of it, is they felt ownership in helping their own brothers or sisters in need at work. So for those of you who don't know, the basic premise, it's a CBS program. It was a really big hit for them for about 5 years or so. And the CEO goes undercover. They really didn't know who you were. We did it the first year of the program. No one even knew what it was about. And they said it was a training video. So they introduced me as someone getting trained. We picked properties. I was new, like I'd only been there about a year. And we picked properties I hadn't been to, or picked parts of properties where people didn't know me. So that really is legit. So I'll just let you watch the video.
Joel Manby, CEO of Hershon Family Entertainment, is undercover in his own company. His coworkers think he's being filmed for a documentary about someone trying out entry-level jobs.
Morning, Albert.
Hey,
Hey.
morning.
This is John Briggs.
Nice to meet you. My
He's going
name's
to be
Albert.
working with you today.
Come over here, John. We'll get you on a turnstile.
Okay, let's do it.
This is all about your first impressions. So it's really a fun experience. I grew up at this park. I've been on this park since I was 2 years old. I have all these ideas about theme parks and stuff. It's not just a place I work, it's my passion. I have to work to go to school, and I'm trying to go to school for work. I'm just doing 10 hours this semester, and then working 40 plus hours a week also.
Wow. What do you think the ideal job is here?
I would like to eventually be a CEO of Hershon Properties.
Who's in that job now?
Joel Manby is our CEO.
Well, I have a lot of emotion for Albert. I really respect his passion and energy. That's great, because you can channel that. And it definitely makes me want to try to help in some way.
My name's Richard.
Hi, Richard.
I'm John.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
So just open it up, turn the black part.
Whoa. Come back behind you here. Whoa, sorry, man. I'll get my boss
I'm
wet on the
telling
first
you,
day.
it's already got me wet. Whoops. You might just stay behind me.
Where do you live?
I live in Galena because 2 years ago we lost our house in a flood. It was rough because we actually lived in a pop-up camper at first. We didn't have a place to go right then. So we still got quite a bit of work to do.
You're a hardworking man. I was overwhelmed hearing that. His whole home being wiped out from a flood. Everything is gone, and he's still working his way through that. Now it's time for me to reveal my true identity to each of the people I worked with over the past week. Well, I'm actually Joel Manby, and I'm CEO of Hershen Entertainment.
No. That was you, okay?
Oh, man.
That
was a pretty good...
You got me.
Richard, you are a very special man, and you have a really special heart.
Thank you.
And we're very lucky to have a man like you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
That story about losing your home really touched me. And what I'd like to do is, for your home, allocate the full $10,000 of catastrophic funds that we have available to help you redo your house.
You got me good at this.
You've inspired me to start a scholarship program. You're gonna get to go to school full time. So you don't have to work all day. You don't have to go to school at night. We're gonna actually pay you your 40 hours a week salary while you go to school. We need a lot of people like you with your kind of passion, your kind of enthusiasm.
First thing I'm calling is my parents. I'm gonna be jumping up and down while I'm telling them, and I'm gonna hear my dad. I know he's gonna be so proud.
So that is the foundation. That's always emotional for me even to watch it. Let me make this point about it, because I know that we all can't start foundations. If you own your company, you can, or you're high up, you should be able to. But there's 2 points I want to make. One is, don't walk out of here, which sometimes I don't stress it enough. Don't walk out of here thinking that this is just about loving, and it also doesn't. The good news is it also gets financial results because it treats people the right way and they perform in an unbelievable fashion. Hershen beats, and I know everything about the theme park, not everything, but I know all about the numbers of all the different companies of all the theme park companies. They're, other than Disney Universal, who are on a different planet, everybody else, Hershen has the best financial performance of any of them. They have better margins, they have better return on investment, they have long-term growth that's consistent. They double their money, cash flow about every 8 years. It's an incredibly run organization. The turnover is the lowest in the industry. The engagement scores of the employees are the highest I've ever seen. The average engagement score in the United States, top box engagement in a company, measured by Gallup at thousands of companies, the average is 30% top box, which is horrific. And that most people are not completely engaged in their work. At Hershen Properties, we took over some as low as 15%. And in every case, after 3 years of implementing these principles, and there's tons I'm not going into about how you actually execute it, we were always over 60% top box. So double national average. In some cases, got it over 70, and in one case, over 80%, 5 out of 5 scores of employees being engaged. So when they're engaged and there's low turnover, especially in a frontline-oriented business, it's incredible what can happen. And so, because sometimes people walk out thinking, well, yeah, you can love on your employees, but we also have to get the job done. It gets the job done. So that's, and we spent on this foundation 1%, less than 1% of our cash flow. I mean, most of the dollars went to roller coasters and attractions. That's what ate up the cash. This foundation was just such a small amount, but had such a huge impact. Best return in money we put in the company. But the thing for you a principle for you to walk away from is, I would imagine, I don't want to speak for you, but if you were like me in my career, I have 2 extremes that I went through. At General Motors, no one cared about really the personal lives of the people. Like I said, it was just getting the numbers done. And so you kind of turned your head and eyes away from personal issues, and you just charged. And I don't think that's a good way to lead. But on the other hand, if you care too much in your heart and you want to help people, it's also overwhelming because there are needs everywhere, and everyone walks into work with something going on. So as a caring leader and as a believer as a leader, or just a caring leader if you're not a believer, what do you do about that? Because it's overwhelming. You can't help everybody. You don't have enough money to help. Even the foundation doesn't have enough money to help everybody. So I learned a principle from Andy Stanley, which is really powerful. He's my pastor in Atlanta, and about 30,000 people every Sunday. But he had a principle. It's not mine. When you're caught in this jam of caring too much and being overwhelmed, his line is, do for one what you wish you could do for everyone. I think that's so powerful. Do for one what you wish you could do for everyone. And so for me, even Hershon had 15,000 employees, and SeaWorld had 25,000. So there's no way I could know everybody or get involved in their caring about their personal lives. So I always pick 2 or 3 people a year. In this case, I picked Albert and Richard, who are in that video. And I have stayed in touch with them, especially Albert. He still wants to be CEO. He's not at Hershon. He jumped because he thought he could, get to that position sooner. But I still coach him and mentor him. And I know one aspect of YBL that's a really important part of YBL is the mentoring program. And I would really encourage you to take your learning and help other people. And I didn't do it for a long time because I felt I have too many faults. I've messed up too many times. I can't really help somebody, but you can. And your mistakes and what you learn from your mistakes can help people just as much as the good things you do. Matter of fact, most of us learn more from our mistakes. So I would really encourage you on that mentoring. So do for one what you wish you could do for everyone. So the last point I'm going to make on the leadership part of this, and then I'm going to move to a more personal part. This slide is what I would call putting your money where your mouth is. I would say almost 100% of the companies have some kind of value system on their wall, on their annual report. Hershon chose to use the 7 words of love. Only about 30% of companies, according to research, actually do any kind of training of those values in their work. And I bet you, I won't ask you to raise your hand, so I bet you 100% would say, yeah, we have values kind of like love, but we don't call it love. And maybe 30% of you have leaders who teach it, but only 1%, well, it depends, 1 to 5% of companies actually have a system in place to put some money where their mouth is, put some meat behind it. And at Hershon and at SeaWorld, there were extensive ways that we backed up these 7 words of love. We would review leaders on the 7 words of love. We actually had 2 or 3 behaviors on each word that we would actually have a review. Although qualitative, you still talked about it, and it was still important. And then the do goals, or what you do every day, everybody has those, right? Your sales results, your margins, your profitability, your return on investment, whatever your do goals are, we all get measured on those. At Hershon, though, we also measured the be goals. What kind of leader do you want to be? How do you want to go about getting your job done? And those 7 words of love were the measurements that we went to on that chart. So if you scored high on the how and high on the what, you actually got the top raise in the company. And you had to hit a certain level of love scores to even qualify for a bonus. It was about, it wasn't super high, but you couldn't do a terrible job and still get the bonus. So we tried to tie it together so it was a system, and it was really amazing how it worked. So I wanted to make that point. There's a lot I'm not going into, but the main point is love can work. It can create a great culture, and that's what Jesus asked us to do. And the aha moment for me was when I realized, most Christian organizations, and I am not being negative at all with this, but most churches, most Christian business organizations focus a lot, almost entirely, on the Great Commission. Spread the gospel of Jesus. Tell others about Christ. I've always found myself, for me, the great commandment of loving others works faster and better. Because if you love people and care about them and are there when they need you, they're more responsive to hearing about Jesus in their life and how it helped you. So I encourage you to please take the Great Commandment into your workplace. I have a few minutes left, and I want to switch gears for a minute. I have talked completely about love as a leadership principle. But now I want to talk about love as a life principle. And I have made huge mistakes in my life. And even though I have become a Christian, and even though it's incredibly important to me, I have still been too driven by the meritocracy of America. You know, achieve, do goal. Didn't focus enough on my B goals. And in the last 3 years, between going to SeaWorld, which was a really horrifically tough business situation, I also made some really bad decisions and ended up losing my marriage after 31 years. And I was not, I think it takes two. I think everyone would agree it takes two to get there. But I acted out poorly, and I didn't keep my marriage vows. And it is the greatest mistake of my life. And if I can keep one of you men from going through the pain of that and not making mistakes like I have made, I'm willing to talk about it, even though it's difficult, because I would do anything to save even just one human being from going through it. I've thought about it, you know, what can I communicate that's honoring to all involved, which I certainly want to be. And I put down 5 things that I thought, you know, these were stop signs that I missed, that I think, I would guess in a room this size with this many men and women that there are some of you who are somewhere along this path, and maybe I can talk some sense into you. The first thing that I stopped doing was putting God number one in my life. We all have our goals, right? And I would always say God's number one, family's number 2, job's number 3. I acted like God didn't even exist, and my job was number 1, and my family was way down the list. That's what my behavior said to my family. And what I had to do after going through the divorce and a lot of time with friends and therapy was I had to just get back to God first every morning, reflect every day on what's important, and it's these 7 words of love. And I still feel to this day, if I had not fallen away from that daily review, that nothing would have happened. I would still be married. The thing is, it's at least a daily review. If not daily, it's hour by hour. I mean, we all have a sinful nature, and we have to really think about Jesus as our number 1 answer man on a daily basis. I acted like God didn't exist, and yet he should be my number 1 audience. So that was the first thing. Put God number 1 again, and don't slip away from daily quiet time where you're reflecting on his word. The second huge mistake I made that I see a lot of men making is we look for happiness. I've had a lot of friends, well, you know, we want you to be happy, Joel. And that's well-intended, but happiness is, I don't think, the goal. The goal should be contentment. And what we're all really restless about is we want to find contentment. Some of us try to find it in our work. Some of us try to find it in our home relationships with our kids, living vicariously through our kids, whatever it may be. But I will tell you that contentment comes from consistently living out whatever value set you have. And that is so critical. Happiness won't come from any achievement you get. I've achieved a lot, and it never made me happy. There's always the next one, the bigger company, the higher goal, whatever. Contentment comes from being consistent with your value set, and that gives you an inner peace. Jack has that. You know, I lost that going through what I went through, and I will tell you, you don't want to go there, because when you lose your own contentment with yourself because of mistakes you've made, It is a very, very deep pit that you get into. And I am just coming out of it. And this is only about the third time I've talked about this in public. It's a very dark pit, and don't lose the contentment with yourself. And it's something only you can control. The third thing that's really important is be honest. And I know that's one of the values, right? And trust me, it's hard for me to stand here and talk about leading with love when I made mistakes living with love. But that is why I'm talking about it, is all of you will make a mistake. Maybe not the magnitude I did, but we all make mistakes, and we all do things we wish we hadn't done. Be honest about it, and be honest quickly about it. I have an accountability group, and I didn't tell them the truth because I knew if I told them the truth, my marriage would be over. And so out of fear and out of shame, I didn't talk to anybody about it. I hid it. And when you hide something, it grows in power. When you talk to people about what you're doing that's wrong, whatever it is, and we all have our sin of choice, right? Talk about it, it loses its power. And that's the value of a small group. And I know that's another thing YBL does. I would really encourage you to find 2 or 3 men or women in a women's group that you can be honest with. And the group I'm in, 35 years, I met them all at Harvard Business School. You know, three guys from Bible study at Harvard is almost an oxymoron because it's not a very spiritual place. But these men actually asked me for a period to not join until I went through the therapy to always tell them the truth. And now, you know, we're coming back together. But it's been a tough ride. But we lie to ourselves. Don't lie to yourself and tell the truth to somebody. The fourth thing is get help quickly. If you think you're on the wrong path, don't hide it. Get the truth out and get help quickly. And then the last thing, because there's some of you, I'm talking as if something's going to happen. There's a lot of you probably where something has happened that caused you shame or guilt or what have you. I would encourage you, because what Satan wants to do, or what evil forces or evil energy want to do, is keep us ashamed and keep us down and kind of take us out of helping other people. And because I have great friends, I was able to forgive myself. It took 3 full years, and I'm not sure I'm completely done, but you have to forgive yourself or you'll just stay in that pit. So if any of you have been through it, I encourage you, because I'm coming out of it. I'm able to see, you know, the other side of light now. So I hope some of my own mistakes in life and sharing it helped some of you. And I'm always happy to talk about it in private if anybody wants to do that. So I thank you so much for your unbelievable attention as I talked about love as a leadership principle, but also love as a personal principle. And I'd like to close in prayer, and then we'll bring Rob back up. So let's bow our heads. Lord, we are so thankful for this group of men who dedicated time this morning in their busy lives to come and hear words about your love and how it's not a suggestion, it's a commandment. And it's a commandment that we should do in all aspects of our lives, not just at home. And we have to love people who we don't care for and compete with, and things that are very, very difficult for us to do, but that's what you call us to do. And I would pray that if any of these men have been touched and feel they need to get a mentor or get into a small group or learn more about their faith, that's something that they do through YBL or other sources. And I want to ask these men in this room 3 quick questions. Out of the 7 words we talked about, what I feel God speaking to me is there's people in this room who need to be kind to somebody, who need to encourage somebody in their lives. And if someone's coming to your heart, I would just ask that you write them a note or give them a call today or tomorrow. And I also would think some people need to be honest with other people about something in their life, or perhaps something another person's doing at work that they need to be honest with them as leaders. And lastly, it's a tough one. Who do you need to forgive in your life so that you can free your heart up for the future. And if any of these questions spark somebody's name in your heart, that's God speaking to you to do something about it. So I ask all of this in Jesus' name. Amen.